I never thought I'd see the day when I'd be sitting alone in a hospital room, staring at the blank TV screen like it owed me answers. The remote was right there on the tray, but I didn't have the energy to push the button. What was the point? It would just be noise. A different kind of silence. At 81 years old, you'd think I'd be used to silence. You'd think I'd learn how to lean into it, let it settle on my shoulders like one of those old quilts my wife used to make. The heady ones, stitched from leftover fabric from her sewing projects. I used to tease her that they weighed more than I did. She'd just smile and tuck it around me anyway. But this silence was different. It wasn't peaceful. It wasn't gentle. It was the kind of silence you notice because you're waiting, hoping, for someone to break it. It was the silence of an empty hallway, of a phone that doesn't ring, of a door that stays shut. It had a weight to it, a chill. My daughter, Susan, was supposed to come. She'd promised on the phone last night, her voice bright and hurried. "I'll be there by 11, Dad. We'll have lunch together." But promises these days seemed lighter than dust in the wind. You could see them, for a second, swirling in a sunbeam, and then they were gone. My son, David, hadn't called in months. Not since before Thanksgiving. And my grandkids. They had school, friends, soccer practice, 1,000 things that apparently translated to, "Maybe next time, Grandpa." So there I sat, propped up like a doll, hooked up to wires that beeped and hissed, breathing air that smelled like bleach and loneliness. The window showed a patch of gray sky, the kind that doesn't promise rain or sun, just more of the same. I'd fallen the week before, slipped on my own foolish shoelace that I hadn't bothered to double knot, and broken my hip. Can you imagine? All the things I survived in life, a war, recessions, raising 2 kids, losing Margaret, yet a shoelace finally took me down. The paramedics had been kind, but their kindness was efficient, professional. They didn't know the story of my life. They just saw an old man on the floor. Life has a sense of humor, all right. A real knee-slapper. The doctors said I'd be in for a while. Physical therapy. Monitoring for my heart. More tests than a man my age has patience for. Poking and prodding, questions asked and answered on clipboards. And every morning when the shift nurse came in with her too cheery, "Good morning, Mr. Jenkins," I told myself the same thing. Someone will show up today. Someone. Anyone. But that day, as the clock on the pale green wall ticked past noon, that hope shrank, dried up, and blew away. It always did around lunchtime. That's when you'd hear the chatter from other rooms, the rustle of gift bags, the laughter of families. My lunch tray had come and gone. Meatloaf, mashed potatoes, green beans. All tasting the same, like nothing. That's when the door clicked open. I didn't bother looking. Probably another nurse rushing through, chart in hand, polite smile that didn't reach the eyes, too busy for small talk. They had their jobs to do. I understood. But then I heard her voice for the very first time. "Good afternoon, Mr. Jenkins," she said, and her voice was warm enough to stir the quiet like sunlight through curtains. It wasn't loud, but it filled the corners of the room. "How are you holding up today?" I looked up. And there she was. A young nurse, maybe mid-30s, maybe younger. I'm terrible at guessing these days. My own grandchildren seem to change faces every year. She had light brown curls, a few escaping from a sensible bun, soft hazel eyes behind simple wire-rimmed glasses, and a smile so genuine it made me straighten up against the pillows without thinking. She wasn't like the others. She wasn't glancing at her watch. She wasn't halfway out the door already, one hand on the handle. She stood still, just inside the room, really looking at me as if waiting for my answer mattered. As if she had all the time in the world. I felt myself clear my throat, a dry, rusty sound. "Well," I muttered, "I'm still here." "That's a good start," she said with a grin, and it reached her eyes, making little crinkles at the corners. Something in me, something I thought had rusted shut years ago, loosened. Just a little turn of a bolt, a release of pressure. And that was how I met Nurse Emily Hart. The woman who would change everything. Emily wasn't assigned to me that day. I learned that later from Brenda, the day shift nurse who did my vitals at 7 a.m. sharp. "Saw Emily in here yesterday," Brenda said, wrapping the blood pressure cuff around my arm. "She's a sweetheart, that one. Works mostly on the West Wing. Must have been passing by." She was just passing by. She saw an old man in a quiet room, no flowers on the sill, no get-well cards on the table, and she stepped in. Not because she had to. Because she wanted to. That first day, she didn't just ask how I was. She saw how I was. She fluffed my pillows with a level of care usually reserved for newborn babies, getting the angle just right so my neck didn't crick. She checked my vitals with a gentle touch, her fingers warm against my cool skin. She asked questions, the real kind, not the checklist type. "How's the pain, really? On a scale of 1 to 10, and don't say 3 if it's a 6. How are you sleeping with all these hallway noises? Do you want the TV on for some background noise, or I could find the radio?" I told her I didn't watch much TV anymore. Too much shouting nowadays. Everyone talking, nobody listening. Reality shows about arguing families, news channels where everyone yelled over each other. She laughed at that, a clear, happy sound. "That's exactly why I don't turn mine on," she said, adjusting my water pitcher so I could reach it. "Noah, that's my son, he watches cartoons, and even those are loud. I prefer quiet when I can get it." And just like that, we were having a conversation. Not small talk about the weather. Not pity talk about how I was feeling. A real, back-and-forth conversation. Something I hadn't had in months, maybe years. Since before Margaret passed, if I'm being honest. Susan and David, when they called, it was updates, not conversations. When she finally had to leave, she said, "I'll check on you later, okay, Mr. Jenkins?" I nodded, pretending not to care whether she would or not. I gave a little shrug, like suit yourself. But after she left, the room felt a little emptier. The silence she'd pushed back crept in again, but it felt softer now, like it had been scolded. She came back 30 minutes later, holding not a clipboard, but a warm ceramic mug. The smell hit me first, sharp, clean, familiar. "Peppermint tea," she said, leaving it on my bedside table. "For the nerves. And because hospital tea tastes like old socks." No offense to the cafeteria. I actually snorted. Me, snorted. At 81. If my wife had been there, she would have shaken her head and told me to act my age. But the sound surprised me. It felt good. She winked. "Drink it while it's hot. I've got to run, but I'll see you tomorrow." And for the first time since I'd been admitted, I wasn't watching the clock. I wasn't counting the minutes until the next dose of pain medicine, or waiting for the long, empty day to end. I found myself listening for the squeak of comfortable shoes in the hallway. I was waiting for her shift to circle back to me. Over the next few days, Emily visited me every chance she got. It became our little routine. Sometimes just for a minute, popping her head in. "Just making sure you're behaving, Mr. J." Sometimes longer when her break allowed it. She'd swap out my water, straighten my sheets, and always ask a real question. She told me about her little boy, Noah, age 6, who loved dinosaurs and insisted every sock should roar when you put it on. She showed me a picture on her phone, a grinning boy with missing front teeth, holding a stuffed stegosaurus. "He's my why," she said simply. She mentioned her mother, who lived 2 states away in Indiana and always sent her homemade jam she didn't have time to eat. "My fridge is full of jars of love," she laughed. "Maybe I'll bring you one. Do you like strawberry?" When she talked, her whole face lit up in a way that made me feel like I wasn't taking time from her, like she wanted to be there, sharing this little piece of her life with me. And in return, I found myself talking more than I had in years. The words, stored up for so long, came out slow at first, then easier. I told her about my late wife, Margaret, who taught second grade for 30 years and always smelled like chalk and lavender sachets. How she could get any stubborn child to read with just a kind word and endless patience. Like you, I said, and Emily blushed. I told her about the old fishing trips I used to take with my brother, Sam, back when the lakes weren't so crowded and you could hear the loons call at dusk. We'd never catch much, but it didn't matter. I told her about my job as a mechanic at Johnson's garage, how I knew the sound of every engine, and how cars these days looked more like spaceships to me. You can't even see the engine anymore. Just a plastic cover. What's the fun in that? She listened. Really listened. Her head would tilt, her eyes would stay on my face. Every laugh of hers felt like a reward. Every moment she nodded, eyes soft and focused, made me feel, well, seen. Not as patient number 402, room 307, but as Arthur Jenkins. A man who had a history. One day she said, "You have so many stories, Mr. Jenkins. You should write a book." "Oh, I've lived a quiet life," I said, waving a hand. "Nothing special. Got up, went to work, raised a family. Same as millions." "No such thing," she replied firmly, smoothing my blanket. "Quiet lives hold the best stories. The important ones. The ones about love and Monday night meatloaf and teaching a kid to ride a bike. Those are my favorite stories to hear." And I didn't even realize until that moment, holding her warm mug of tea, that I'd been waiting my whole life for someone to say that. To tell me that my ordinary life was a story worth hearing. A week passed. Then 8 days. Not one family member showed their face. Oh, they called, sometimes. But always with excuses that sounded rehearsed, even to my old ears. "Dad, I'm slammed with work. This big project. You understand? Do you really need me to come? You sound just fine over the phone." "I'll try tomorrow, I promise." Tomorrow rarely came. Every day around 2 o'clock, when visiting hours hit their peak, I watched the door. I'd hear footsteps, see a shadow past the little window, and my heart would give a foolish little jump. And every day, when it was just a doctor or a dietitian, I felt that familiar sting behind my ribs, that quiet ache you hide under sarcasm and half-smiles. I got good at the half-smile. It was easier than explaining. Emily noticed. Of course she did. She noticed everything. One afternoon, she stepped in just as visiting time ended. The hustle in the hall had died down. That was when the truth slipped out, the thing I tried not to say out loud, the shameful, childish need. "Guess it's just you again," I muttered, looking at my hands on the stiff white sheet. She paused, setting down her chart with a soft click. "Do you wish someone else were here?" she asked gently. Not prying. Just asking. I swallowed around a sudden tightness in my throat. "I wish someone remembered," I said, the words coming out rough. I wish I was still on the list. The important list." Her face softened in a way I can't describe. It wasn't pity. Pity makes you feel small. This was understanding. It was like she was looking at that lonely place inside me and giving it a nod. "My mom says getting older feels like becoming invisible," she said quietly, pulling the room's single chair closer to the bed. "She says people start looking through you, talking over you. But I don't think you're invisible, Mr. Jenkins. I see you." And then she did something no one had done in years. Not a nurse, not a friend, not my kids. She sat down. She got comfortable. And she stayed. Not for a minute while she gave me a pill. Not for 5 minutes while she took my temperature. But for nearly a full hour. She kept me company while the sun set outside the window, painting the clouds orange and pink. She talked to me about everything and nothing. Asked me what my first car was, a 1955 Chevy Bel Air, sky blue. Told me silly hospital secrets, like which doctor stole everyone's yogurt from the break room fridge and which nurse snored like a chainsaw during night shift naps. I laughed so hard I hurt my hip again, and then we laughed about that, too. It was ridiculous, really. A grown man finding his best company in a near stranger. But in that hour, it felt like the loneliest part of me, the part one kept hidden in a drawer like old photos, was finally getting some air. Finally getting company. When she finally stood to leave, her knees cracking, she put a warm, steady hand on my shoulder. "I'll be here," she said, her voice firm and sure. "You're not alone in this place, okay? Remember that." And for the first time in a long, long time, I believed it. It happened 4 days later. A Tuesday. Tuesdays are always dull. My daughter called that morning, rushing through her sentences like she was late for a deadline. I could hear car horns in the background. "Dad, I can't come today. Jeremy has a dentist appointment and then I've got back-to-back meetings. I'm so sorry. I'll call tonight. Love you." Click. She hung up before I could even say, "That's all right." Before I could ask about Jeremy's teeth. She didn't even ask how my physical therapy was going. And something inside me, something that had been holding tight for weeks, maybe years, just cracked open. I don't know what exactly pushed me over the edge. Maybe it was the loneliness, piled up like dirty snow. Maybe it was the helplessness of needing someone to help me to the bathroom. Maybe it was the quiet, cold fear that this was it, that my life had shrunk to the size of this hospital bed, this room, and a handful of short, distracted phone calls. I tried to hold it in. Men of my generation, we don't cry in front of people. We stiffen our upper lips. We endure. We bore it quietly. That's what my father did, and his father before him. But that day, I didn't endure. Emily came in for her afternoon round, her smile already forming, right as I tried to pretend I wasn't wiping my eyes with the rough sheet. I turned my head quick, but she had eyes like a hawk. She saw through me instantly. One evening, she came in after her dinner break. Her steps were slow, and her eyes had a tiredness in them, the kind you only get from bad news, not from a long day. "What's wrong?" I asked immediately. She looked surprised, then touched. "You noticed?" "Hard not to," I said. "You look like someone unplugged the sun." That got a little laugh out of her, but not a real one. It was a tired puff of air. Finally she sank into the chair inside, her shoulders dropping. My son's school called. Some of the kids were teasing him today about his glasses. Called him Four Eyes, Owl Boy. He came home crying. He just sat in his room and didn't want to play. Her voice quavered, just for a second. This strong, capable woman, brought low by her child's pain. "Kids can be cruel," I said, feeling a flare of anger for a little boy I'd never met. "But they forget kindness just as quickly. He'll remember your hug long after he forgets their words." She nodded, wiping a finger under her glasses. "I know. I wish I could protect him from everything. Wrap him in bubble wrap." And for the first time, I was the one who reached out. I patted her hand where it rested on the bed rail. An old, gnarled hand on a young, smooth one. "You're a good mother, Emily," I said, and I meant it with every bone in my body. "He'll grow strong because of you. Because he knows he's loved. That's the best armor you can give him." Her eyes watered, just a bit. She squeezed my fingers. "Thank you, Arthur," she whispered. We just sat there for a while, two people from different generations, from different worlds, sharing a quiet understanding. The hum of the hospital was our background music. It struck me then, clear as a bell. She wasn't just helping me heal my body and my spirit. I was helping her, too. Giving her a place to put down her own load for a minute. Giving her the wisdom of years, something she could take home to her son. We were a team. 2 weeks into my stay, things took a turn. A bad turn. I woke up in the deep, dark part of the morning before the dawn, barely able to breathe. A sharp, hot pain shot up my side and wrapped around my ribs, worse than anything I'd felt since the fall. It was a vice, squeezing. I fumbled for the call button, my fingers numb. Nurses rushed in, their calm professionalism replaced with urgent efficiency. Lights flipped on, voices overlapped, forming a blur of blue scrubs and beeping alarms. Words swirled around me, BP dropping. O2 stats. Page Dr. Morrison. But one voice cut through it all, steady and clear, right by my ear. Stay with me, Mr. Jenkins. Look at me. Arthur, look at me, Emily said, her hand gripping mine tight, an anchor in the chaos. They whisked me for tests. Scans that word and clicked. Needles. The kind of medical chaos you barely remember, just flashes of light and concerned faces. Turned out I had a small blood clot in my lung. A pulmonary embolism. Serious, the doctor said, his face grave. But treatable. For hours I drifted in and out of a druggy haze. Every time I managed to pry my eyes open, swimming into focus, there she was. Sometimes by the bed. Sometimes talking softly to a doctor in the corner. Sometimes just sitting, a silent sentinel in a plastic chair. She didn't leave my side. Not once. Doctors came and went. Other nurses switched shifts. The sun rose and climbed the sky. But Emily stayed, long past the end of hers. I saw the dark circles under her eyes, saw her sip bitter coffee from a paper cup. When the crisis finally passed, and the blood thinners did their job, and the pain eased to a dull throb, she finally sat back in her chair, her whole body slumping with exhaustion. You stayed, I murmured, my voice a dry whisper. She smiled weakly, pushing a stray curl from her forehead. Of course I did. Why? I asked. It was the only word I could find. You should have gone home. To Noah. Her answer was simple. No big speech. She just looked at me, her hazel eyes earnest behind her smudged glasses. Because you matter. 3 words. No one had said those words to me and made me believe them in years. Not since Margaret. You matter. They hung in the quiet room, more powerful than any medicine. A few days after the clot scare, my family finally came. My daughter, Susan, my son, David, even 2 of the grandkids, looking awkward and glued to their phones. They came in a flurry, arms full of supermarket flowers and excuses that tumbled out before I could even say hello. Dad, you gave us such a scare. We came as soon as we could coordinate. Sorry it took so long, work has been insane. The traffic was unbelievable. I was happy to see them, sure. Their faces were familiar, beloved. But after everything, the long empty hours, the fear, Emily's quiet vigil, their presence felt late. Like showing up for the encore when you missed the whole concert. They stayed 10 minutes. 15 maybe. They asked the doctors questions I'd already answered for them on the phone. They talked to each other about parking and weekend plans. Then they leaned in for quick, perfume and cologne-scented kisses, promised we'll come back soon, and left in a swirl of chatter, taking all the energy in the room with them. The silence they left behind was the old kind. The heavy kind. Emily walked in about 5 minutes after they'd gone. She was carrying a fresh jug of ice water. She looked at the bright, cellophane-wrapped bouquet on the windowsill and then at my face. They came, huh? She said gently. Yeah, I said. I tried to sound more cheerful. All of them. Even the kids. She set the water down and sat beside me. She didn't say the things she could have said. She didn't say, "That's nice," if it wasn't true. She just smiled a soft, knowing smile. "But you were here when it mattered," she said, as if reading my mind. And I realized something then, a truth so simple it was profound. I had spent so long expecting my family, my flesh and blood, to fill the hole that growing old and losing Margaret had left in my life. But instead, the hole was being filled, stitch by gentle stitch, by a nurse with tired eyes, a warm smile, and a heart that cared too much for her own good. She was right. Family isn't just blood. It's who shows up. It's who stays. After nearly a month in that place, the physical therapist declared me stable. The doctor, looking over his charts, said I could go home. I should have felt thrilled. Elated. This was the day I'd been counting towards. But instead, as I watched the orderly pack my few things, the slippers Susan brought, the mystery novel from the hospital trolley I never read, I felt a cold, slick fear in my gut. Home meant silence again. The true, deep silence of an empty house. Home meant no one checking on me every few hours, no familiar voice saying good morning. Home meant the end of seeing Emily every day, our conversations, her laughter, the way she made the world feel smaller and kinder. She sensed it. Of course she did. She came in as they were getting the wheelchair ready. "Big day," she said, her smile a little sad around the edges. "Big day," I echoed. "Are you nervous?" she asked, knowing the answer. "A bit," I admitted. There was no point hiding from her. "It's quiet there." She squeezed my hand. "You're stronger than you think. You've survived a broken hip and a blood clot. You can survive your own living room." "But what if," I started, the fears tumbling out. "What if I fall again? What if I get lonely and just fade away?" She cut me off with a look, then a firm smile. "You're not losing me, Mr. Jenkins. We didn't go through all that for me to disappear." She reached into the pocket of her scrubs, pulled out a small notepad and a pen, and wrote something down. She tore off the sheet and pressed it into my palm. "This is my cell number. For real emergencies only. Like, I've fallen emergencies. Not I'm bored emergencies." She pointed a finger at me, mock stern. "And for updates. I want to know how you're doing. I want to know when you finally beat that physical therapist's walking record. Understand?" I nodded, the paper feeling precious in my hand, too choked up to speak. As the orderly wheeled me out into the hallway, she walked alongside us, all the way to the elevator bank. When the doors dinged open, she leaned down and whispered, "Just for me, you're not alone, Arthur. Remember that. You have a friend." I looked into her kind, earnest face and I believed her. I still do. I've been home for 6 months now. The house was quiet, just like I feared. For the first week, the silence was so loud it hurt my ears. But then I'd look at that piece of paper with her number on it, tucked under my phone, and it felt less heavy. "And Emily?" She called that first Saturday morning. "Just checking in. Did you eat breakfast? Is the home health aide nice?" She calls every week since. Sometimes twice. We talk about nothing and everything. She drops by on her days off, too. She brings her son, Noah. He's a whirlwind of energy and questions. He loves my old model trains, the ones I set up in the basement for my own kids a lifetime ago. The sound of his laughter bouncing off the basement walls is a medicine no doctor could prescribe. He calls me Mr. Arthur, and he tells me all about T-Rex versus Triceratops. We talk. We laugh. We share stories. She tells me about her tough days at work, and I tell her about the stubborn squirrel at my bird feeder. She tells me I'm good for her soul, that I remind her what matters. I tell her she saved my life. Because she did. Not just the day of the blood clot, though, Lord knows, she did that too. No. She saved me from feeling invisible in a world that moves too fast. She saved me from disappearing quietly into the background of my own life. She saved me from fading away without anyone noticing I was gone. She brought sunlight back into my little world, warm and steady, the kind that doesn't blind you but helps you grow. And every time she visits, every time she sits in the same kitchen chair she's claimed as her own, sipping the tea I've learned to make just how she likes it, I'm reminded of something I had almost forgotten, something her kindness engraved back on my heart. Sometimes, family isn't who you expect to bring you casseroles. Sometimes angels don't have wings, they wear sensible shoes and scrubs with cartoon prints. And sometimes, the person who stays when no one else shows up is the one who changes your life forever. Not with grand gestures, but with peppermint tea, a held hand, and the simple, powerful gift of showing up.